we're back with another Fort Lauderdale Explained video. Today, we're talking about the suburbs. Welcome to Living Fort Lauderdale, where we make videos weekly about what it's like to move to or live in the Fort Lauderdale area. So if that's what you're looking for, make sure to subscribe. And I am a licensed realtor here in Florida, so just as much as I love making these videos, I love even more to help you with your real estate needs, whether that's buying or selling. If you have any questions or you're planning a move down here, feel free to reach out at any time. I'd love to hear from you. But with that being said, let's talk about the north suburbs. So we're going to go really broad on this video and talk about the north suburbs as a whole. And when we're talking about the north suburbs, we're really talking about everything outlined on this map and everything north of I-595, which is going to be Plantation, Sunrise, Tamarack, Coconut Creek, and then up here in the northwest you have Coral Springs and Parkland. And just a reminder, for these Fort Lauderdale Explained videos, we follow three main criteria, which is going to be proximity, style, and cost. So getting right into proximity, this area of the suburbs can be a great option if you're somebody who works in Fort Lauderdale, maybe works downtown, minus maybe Coral Springs and Parkland, just because they're a little bit further out. But towns like Plantation and Sunrise, they're both really big towns with about 100,000 people each, and they're almost just directly west of the city, so commuting into the city without having to get on highways can be pretty easy. But you still can never count out that Florida traffic. Then as we get a little bit north towards Coral Springs and Parkland, this is where the commute's gonna maybe get a little bit more rough. You can see taking the highways, it's about 10 miles longer than taking the city streets, but it's going to cut out a lot of time and a lot of that inner city traffic. And as far as the beaches go, no matter where you are, there's pretty much a road that's going to be a straight shot to one of the bridges. Even as far west as you go, if you look at this map, it'll take you maybe an hour and change at max to get to a beach, but you could be as close as 20 minutes if you're living in a place like Coconut Creek. And something that I do get asked about a lot is necessities like food shopping and stuff like that, then some specialty stores like Whole Foods, malls, Costco, things like that. So as far as like your necessities, when it comes to food shopping, it doesn't matter where you are in South Florida, you're probably not going to be further than 5 minutes away from a Publix. If you look at the map, I'm trying to populate all the Publix stores in this whole area, and it's not even showing them all. I actually have to go to each individual area and zoom in and then keep refreshing it, and then you could see how many Publix stores there really are. Then as far as Walmart, you're no more than 15 minutes away. There is a couple malls scattered throughout this area. You have a full-size mall in Coral Springs, Plantation, and then of course you have the massive Sawgrass outlets. And then as far as some of the specialty stuff goes, like Whole Foods and Costco, this is when it gets a little more scarce. And if you look at the map for Whole Foods, you can see that there's really only two in this area. The rest of them are in the city. Depending on which part of this area you live, it may make sense to just go into one of the cities. Same for Costco, only two. There's the one up near Coral Springs and then just south of 595, which technically is not the area we're talking about, but if you live down there, that's probably going to be the closest one. I also should note that there is an IKEA in Sunrise, and the only reason I even tell you this is because outside of Miami, the closest IKEA is in Orlando, so that may be a big deal to some people. And just to touch on the size of this area, it's a pretty big area. We're talking over 90 square miles, over 500,000 people, so it's not necessarily going to be really spread out here. There's some pretty big towns in this area. You have Coral Springs has over 130,000 people, and then like I mentioned before, Plantation and Sunrise have a combined 200,000 people. So this is definitely going to be your more densely populated area of the suburbs, and then the further east you go, is where it really starts to kind of bleed into the cities, get a little bit more densely populated. But then at the same token, you have areas like parts of Parkland and parts of Coconut Creek, which are unincorporated, and that's where you may find some land out there. Now, jumping right into the style, it's going to kind of be a mixed bag depending on where you go. Like I just mentioned, the further east you go is when it tends to be a little bit older. It tends to bleed into the cities a little bit more. Then you have University Drive, which is going to kind of be the dividing line. And when you go west of University is when things tend to just get a little bit more of that suburban feel. And a lot of the homes east of University were developed in the 60s and 70s. As you start to go west, that's when you start to see more of the 90s to mid 2000s developments. But a town like Coconut Creek is a little bit different because this town, if you look on the map and look at the borders, it doesn't extend west, it runs more north and south, so it doesn't really follow that same framework of being west of University, being a little bit newer. So in Coconut Creek, it just tends to be the northern part of town. As you get closer to Palm Beach County and Boca, that tends to be the newer area, and the further south you go is what tends to be a little bit older and a little bit more densely populated. Then you have a town like Parkland, which is pretty much just completely different from the rest of them, whereas, you know, a majority of this town was developed in the 2000s to 2010s. Definitely an exclusive town. A majority of it is gated communities, but you can find some older homes on some really big lots in the unincorporated part of Parkland. That's going to be the older part of Parkland, and when I say older, I'm talking 90s. I mean, this is a fairly new town, and there's not really a ton of commercial in Parkland, not a lot of commercial development, so chances are, if you're living in Parkland, anything outside of your daily necessities, you're probably traveling to Coral Springs. And Coral Springs is probably one of those towns that I get asked the most about in this area, so I am going to be doing a video on that town on its own, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. But we're going to keep this video very broad. Now, as far as cost goes, at the end of the day, yes, you're in the suburbs, but you're still in South Florida, so it's just going to be very mixed depending on where you go. Now, in a typical metro area, usually the further away you get from the center of the city or the downtown area, the cheaper it gets, but South Florida doesn't really follow that framework. Just for example, Parkland is definitely the furthest away in the northern suburbs, all the way northwest, and it's also the most expensive. I mean, the median home price in Parkland is $1.2 million, and that's not average, that's median, so that's right in the middle. Not uncommon to see $10+ million homes in Parkland, brand new. But something that you just need to know about, whether it's Fort Lauderdale, the city, or just the whole metro area or South Florida in general, when it comes to pricing, it's very specific to the community or the neighborhood that you choose to live in. So just for example, there's a community in Tamarack called the Mainlands. It's a really big community. It's not far off the border of Fort Lauderdale, and a majority of this community, well, I don't want to say a majority, but a lot of it is 55 and over homes. So it's not uncommon to find a house there for around $200,000, single family home. At the same token, in the same community, in the Mainlands, if it's not a 55 and over home, you're looking at maybe $400,000 to $600,000. Then if you go west of University into a neighborhood like Woodmont Country Club, still in Tamarack, you're looking at more like $700,000 to $900,000. Same goes for Sunrise. It's very possible to find a home in Sunrise Golf Village, which is going to be one of the older areas of Sunrise, for under $300,000 for a single family home. It almost doesn't make sense how the pricing works down here, and people ask me about this all the time, and all I can tell you is it's very neighborhood specific. I mean, just look at this map of Plantation. I'm going to pull up the last 30 days of recently sold homes, and you can see as I go from east to west how the prices they're all different, and it just really depends on what neighborhood you're in. Distance from the city doesn't matter. So just keep in mind, it's very important to start very broad, narrow down some areas of interest based on how much you want to spend, and that's when you start getting more specific on certain towns and then even some certain neighborhoods. And this is something that we'll go over on our first Zoom call. So my number and email are back on the screen. Feel free to reach out at any time or go to the link in my description and book a Zoom call with me so we can help you figure out what's the best fit for you. Appreciate you watching.